we already mentioned that students are trying to figure out how to navigate in a remote and hybrid work environment. From a topic standpoint, I think the pandemic led them to do a lot of soul searching. So there's a lot of emphasis on purpose, a lot of emphasis on the mission of a company, how it aligns with their own values and so forth. So there's a big, I think, especially at the undergrad level, a big shift in that direction.
One of the things we all want to feel a bit empowered about coming out of this is really the dynamics of Chicago and the labor market and how we're attracting and or retaining talent. But what is the impact of this interest in entrepreneurship of graduates owning their own business and being independent? What kind of an impact do we see that having on the labor market, both in terms of going into more mature industries and or creating opportunities for growth? And how are your programs really helping to prepare entrepreneurs to fulfill that?
The issue that is well known, and it's one of the reasons that the state invested in this Discovery Partners Institute down at the 78, is so many of the entrepreneurs get advice that in order to be successful, they need to be part of a rich entrepreneurial ecosystem, and everybody tells them that means they need to head to the West Coast, or if they're in health sciences, they head up to Cambridge. And we are working really hard, and I know a lot of people are, to figure out how can we keep more of that talent and more of those startups here in Chicago. And I know all of our universities are playing a role in that, as well as a lot of civic organizations and so forth. But there are some issues that still need to be overcome. There's just not the depth of venture capital in Chicago that you see in other places. We don't have the same level of sort of ecosystem where startups can be each other's customers and where you can trade talent and things like that. So it's a work in process. I'm optimistic about it, but it's going to continue to take a lot of focus and a lot of care and feeding, and the economic environment here needs to be conducive to that. So policy is going to matter. There's a lot of pieces, and I think Chicago has an opportunity to really emerge as the entrepreneurship, one of the great entrepreneurship hubs, but it is not a guarantee we're going to get there.
One of the things we have seen, and certainly many of you who run businesses or manage teams are looking for continued opportunities for continuing education. So what are those opportunities outside of a structured MBA program or other formalized teaching programs for continuing ed? I think I will start with Dean Brown on this have you seen an increased interest in certification programs and shorter term educational opportunities?
The concept of a degree where you go to school for 4 years, maybe you work a couple years and you go back for a year or two and you think that's all the education you need. That model made sense 600 or 800 years ago when in 4 or 5 years you could pretty much learn all the knowledge there was to learn in the world and be set for the rest of your life. And that's just not the case today. I mean, we have students graduating 2 years ago that are already feeling behind on some of the technology. 6 months ago, nobody had ever heard of ChatGPT, right? And so I think that what we need to be increasingly thinking about are models of work and education that are integrated with each other and that are lifelong. And we all talk about lifelong learning, but we haven't really formalized it yet. And so I think the key to that, or the path to that, is going to be we have students that are getting work experience, working on experiential learning projects and so forth during their education, but then that kind of melding together of formal education and work experience just needs to continue. So we are in the process. I think we've launched 6 graduate certificates. We've got like 4 more coming along. I may not have those numbers exactly right, that are like 3 4-credit courses that together gives you a transcriptable credential from the University of Illinois. And for some people, that's going to be all they want. They've reached a point in their career and they're like, I never really had much finance as an undergrad and it's holding me back now and I want to go back and get that. We've done some other interesting things where you can then start with those credentials and then stack them into a degree so you don't have to repeat the credits if you decide you want to get a master's in management, and then you decide you want to stack that into an MBA. So we're creating this whole set of like Lego building blocks that are really adaptable to what people need when they need it. And I think our whole higher ed industry of business education really needs to move more in that direction.
As you talk to students in your programs today about the values or the culture of organizations that they're interested in potentially joining, what kind of role for all of us who are employers, particularly here in Chicago, what role does that play now as a graduate kind of evolves the type or evaluates the type of company that he or she would like to be a part of, and how does your program kind of help to guide that?
College student generations always get labeled in various ways, but they are very smart and they're very perceptive. And they can tell when your mission statement is just empty words on a page and you're not living it, right? So if your organization is one that has a strong culture that takes its broader mission or purpose seriously, and people live it and breathe it and act in ways that are largely consistent with it, they will know that, and that will be attractive to them. And when there's a disconnect, it's just words on a website, that's not going to work. So that's I would just amplify exactly what my colleagues have said.
Would love each of your perspectives or updates on what you are seeing in terms of where your graduates are going. How is Chicago positioned? You've talked about some of the industries that are important, and certainly where we've got gaps that has an impact. But do you see changes in the percentage of students who specifically want to stay in Chicago, find that opportunity here versus other cities? So maybe Dean Brown?
Chicago is still attracting really good talent. I think the vibrancy of the downtown as a place to live is still very attractive to undergrads that are coming out. And there's a lot of great companies here. I'd say those that are going into finance and accounting, this is a very attractive place to be. I think where we probably see a little more outflow of talent is still in the tech space. Probably not surprising.
Well, one last question for each of you, perhaps just a final remark or some insights that you'd like to share with the audience as we are all grappling with how to maximize our opportunities to draw talent and realize talent within our corporations and to retain talent out of our fine institutions here. So perhaps some final remark?
I'll just underscore everything that was just said. Look, this city is enormously fortunate to have so many great universities around us. I mean, there's 5 business school deans here today. And it's not just the business schools. We have amazing engineering schools and arts and all of that stuff. And not many states can boast that, right? And so the more that we can do as employers and universities together, the more that the universities can do together, the more that the city and the state can do to support higher education in the state and so forth, the better off we're going to be. I'm a true believer in the power of education, in the power of research, and the power of innovation. And I think the universities are one of the greatest comparative advantages that this country have had. I think it's one of those like top 5 things on my list of why the United States sort of, dominated the world economy and so forth over the last century. And but we can't take that for granted. We need to make investments in our higher ed system, public and private, in order to maintain that. And I think if we do that, the future for Chicago could be very bright, but we cannot take it for granted.